I'm very proud that over my almost 30 years of public service, I have had no scandals. I've always been honest, I have the courage to take the long-term view, and I've shown good judgment. I have high ethical standards.
It kind of reminds me of a guy running for high school president.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Welcome, folks. We're back for this special post-debate coverage. The debate is just wrapping up. We're joined once again by the one and only Dick Morris, a Newsmax political analyst, and Rick Unger, the co-host of the Daily Wrap here on Newsmax Television. And in a moment, we'll be joined by Alan Dershowitz. Dick, I want to ask you, as the debate continues to go on here, Lincoln Chafee was really the only one, unless I missed something, in that opening remark who brought up, you know, I have high ethics, I've never had scandals, which I guess could be interpreted as a direct knock at Hillary, but no one else went there.
Yeah, I think that's true. Of course that's true. And I think it made sense for them. This is a group of people who, by definition, are not going to vote against Hillary over the ethical issues. And if they are going to vote against her, they're going to do it anyway. The Democratic debate's not going to help or hurt. This was the second front in the war on Hillary. The first front is the ethical issue, and that's out there, and the Republicans and the FBI and basically the Obama administration, too, is pushing that issue. And it's going to be out there, and it's going to hurt her, and it's going to really continue to drag her down. This debate was about opening a second front against Hillary, issues where she cannot follow and will not follow. You know, I had a thought as I watched the debate. People have often asked, would Bill Clinton win a third term if he ran now? And everybody says, yeah, he probably could. Well, I don't think he would win the Democratic primary.
Good point. Rick?
I loved your comment when you started, because I was thinking exactly the same thing. And you wonder what impact that has. I understand. I agree with Dick. I agree with you. What he was trying to do was get that subtle dig in on Hillary, but it came across so silly, and it came across like somebody running for.
With all due respect to the senator, he has a goofy presentation.
He does,
yeah.
And so I think it made the whole thing goofy.
Yeah, kind of.
So I don't know if he was the best person to try and land that blow.
Well, here's a man who certainly has no goofy presentation. He's one of the foremost attorneys in the history of the United States, and he is legendary Harvard law professor, author of The Case Against the Iran Deal, How We Could Now Stop Iran from Getting Nukes, Alan Dershowitz. Welcome, Alan.
Hey, thank you. Now, you know, that debate made me really understand why I'm a Democrat.
Okay, well, first of all, let me just
so much of a better debate than the Republican
You
debate.
think so?
Oh, without a doubt. Come on.
I'm not alone any longer.
How so? How so, Alan? How so?
Talking about serious policy issues. They were not screaming at each other. They were not making the kinds of personal attacks. It was a much higher level debate. And I think the winner of the debate was the Democratic Party. And I also think that Hillary Clinton did great. And anybody who expected that she would be somehow wounded by this were wrong. Sanders did great, but he can't carry a single state, so he's not going to get the nomination. And the others were just sideshows. But Hillary Clinton survived. Did fine, and she's going to be the nominee, and she is probably going to win the election.
All right, I want to welcome everybody who might be tuning in to us here now for the first time. The debate is officially, finally over on CNN. So welcome aboard. This is a special post-debate show here on Newsmax Television. I'm Steve Malzberg, along with Rick Unger, the co-host of the Daily Wrap here on Newsmax TV. Newsmax political analyst Dick Morris is with us. And as you just heard, if you're just tuning in, that was Alan Dershowitz, who's with us as well. Now, you heard Alan give his assessment of who won the debate and why. Dick Morris, I know that you have a slightly different view of who won the debate tonight.
Yeah, this was a zero-sum game between Sanders and Hillary. And you got to start with the fact that 80% of the people who watched this debate didn't really know Sanders. And now they knew him, they met him, they saw an articulate, likable, vigorous, relevant guy, and they saw him make issues vis-a-vis Hillary about Wall Street regulation, about Glass-Steagall, and about war and peace and Iraq and the no-fly zone, all of which I think will break in Sanders' favor. I think that what has happened now is there's a second front against Hillary. The first front is the ethics, Benghazi emails, and all of that. That had no place in this debate, and it's appropriate that it didn't. But what the second front is now is Sanders, when he shook Hillary's hand and said, I'm with her on this, he essentially was telling the voters, you can believe Hillary is somewhat honest and somewhat trustworthy and still vote for me because you think Wall Street needs tougher regulation. I want to challenge directly, Alan, one key thing that you said. I believe that if it remains a two-way primary of Hillary against Sanders, I believe Sanders can and most likely will defeat Hillary, not just in Iowa and New Hampshire, but all over. And I think that that's why the Democratic establishment cannot let it be a two-way primary, but instead has got to put Biden into the race because at all costs, they have to stop Sanders. And if it were a three-way primary, I think that Biden would win, and I think Hillary would be in a tough fight for second place with Sanders.
What about it, Alan?
No, I just don't agree. I don't think Sanders can win the nomination. I think the Democrats know that he would make McGovern seem like a vote getter. Sanders probably would not win a single state. It's conceivable he would win his own state. It's conceivable
in the general election.
He would come close to
general.
Massachusetts, but I don't think he would win in the general election a single state. If he did, it would be like McGovern, less than a handful of states. The Democrats know that.
Go ahead, Dick. Go ahead, Dick.
Humphrey in almost every major state. Actually, Humphrey didn't even enter the primaries. He knew he would lose them. He was way, way behind in the Democratic primary polls. And that's the same situation. It's the radical left of the Democratic Party taking the joint over and marginalizing and pushing Hillary out of the picture.
But Dick, I obviously I agree with Alan, and it very much mirrors what I've been saying in the first part of the show. Sanders is not even going to have the ground organization as we get into these southern states to do this. You know that. Yes, he's got a very good shot at New Hampshire. I'll agree with you there. He could even overcome the 5, 6, 7 points in Iowa. But I struggle to see how you think that he has a shot when we get to South Carolina and beyond. Those Democrats down there are not going to vote for somebody who calls himself a socialist. It's not going to happen.
Dick?
When you're saying Democrats, you mean blacks.
No, I mean Democrats. There are white Democrats
The
there.
electorate is African American. A quarter of the Democratic primary
You think they're going to vote for Bernie?
I think that Obama is going to drop some bombs on Hillary, is going to push Biden's candidacy.
Only
By
if
the
he's
time we
in.
get to South Carolina, Biden will be in the race, and the black vote will be turning away from Hillary in droves. And I think the guy who's going to win the South Carolina primary is Biden.
But we have to take it where we are now, Dick. Let's say, and you might very well be right, what if Biden isn't in the race?
What can happen? And the key thing about this debate is Biden wasn't there. And that once you put Biden there, and then you play it against what happened in this debate, the results are inevitable.
Well,
and Biden has to come into this now.
I think the most
because it was
important
so evident
audience
that
for this
Sanders would defeat Hillary.
Go ahead, Alan.
I think the most important audience for this debate was one person, and that is Biden. I think he was sitting there and watching this debate and deciding whether or not he can enter the primaries and actually win. And if I'm Biden very much, he's a wonderful, wonderful man. I think if I'm his advisor and I'm watching that debate, I say to him, no, I don't think so. I think Hillary did well. She wasn't destroyed. And you would just be a spoiler. I think this debate relatively assures Hillary that she will be the ultimate nominee. Now, you know, she can falter between now and ultimate primaries, but I think this debate was very good.
See, Alan, I'm going to even it out here because I'm with Dick and you're more or less with Rick. I think that you're right, that if Hillary knocked it out of the park and just blew everyone away, I would say it might be a little tougher for Biden, although I think he pretty much has his mind made up one way or another, and the debate is not the determining factor. However, I agree with Dick. I said all along as I'm watching this debate, and I don't like Hillary, I'll be honest. I'm no fan of Bernie Sanders, but I think Sanders was presenting himself, as Dick made so clear, to the American public, much of it for the first time, Democratic voters. And I think that he more than held his own. I think he rose head and shoulders above Hillary, who really didn't have a lot to say and was more center-right, not appealing to the Democrat base, where Bernie was Elizabeth Warren.
Alan, I don't believe for 1 minute that Joe Biden is undecided about getting into this race. That is all an act. If he were genuinely not decided to run, he would have doused all the speculation. What's going on now?
Which way do you think he's decided?
That Bernie Sanders is making his own nomination so likely that the leaders of the Democratic Party are now going to line up behind Biden and force him into the race. But he won't take much forcing. I think he's letting himself be available because he wants to be president, as he's demonstrated twice before.
All right, Alan, I want you to hear, and I want us all to hear, and Alan, I want you to weigh in first on the candidates were asked in kind of rapid-fire form to talk about the greatest threat to our national security, and here's how it went.
What is the greatest national security threat to the United States?
The chaos in the Middle East.
Nuclear Iran remains the biggest threat, along with the spread of ISIL.
The spread of nuclear weapons, nuclear material.
The global crisis of climate change. Cyber warfare against this country.
All right, Hillary seemed, those were abbreviated answers, even though they all were short. Hillary seemed to struggle, the availability of nuclear weapons getting in the hands of the wrong people. I mean, that's certainly a threat, but she seemed to struggle to come up to name, maybe she didn't want to name something that people could pin on her as she was responsible for it in the first place. Were you satisfied with those answers in general and Hillary specifically?
No, I was not. I mean, the only answer I was satisfied with was nuclear Iran.
Right.
I thought some of the other answers were jokes. And first of all, nobody's going to win on climate control. You're going to win young people on that, but you're not going to win the election on that. And, you know, the Democrats have to move to the center. That's the key. That's the way they can win the election. Hillary knows that. The leaders of the Democratic Party know that. A socialist is not going to be elected president. The former governor of Rhode Island is not going to be elected president. It's between Biden and Hillary, and I think right now Hillary has the substantial advantage, which is probably why Biden won't get into the race. If he does get into the race, he'll make it a close race.
Alan, I want to thank you for being with us, sir. Appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
We'll speak to you soon.
Sure.
Alan Dershowitz, ladies and gentlemen. Dick, I know you want to weigh in on that as well.
Yeah, the fundamental disagreement I have with Alan there is that I don't think the Democratic Party in the primary will move to the center. I think he's right. They have to. I think he's right that Sanders would carry like 2 states in the general election, just like McGovern did. But just like McGovern rallied the latent left in the Democratic Party, as Goldwater rallied the right in the Republican Party, I believe that the left is going to dominate this election, this primary, and going to defeat Hillary. And I think that the pros in the Democratic Party will be so scared of that Biden's going to have to get in. They set up 2 key issues tonight. Wall Street, where she came out against repeal of Glass-Steagall, where she came out basically against a policy of systematically breaking up the big banks, and peace, where she, her vote for the Iraq war stood out like a sore thumb with everybody else opposing it, and her advocacy of a no-fly zone in Syria made it relevant to the current debate. And her answers on Libya, I think, also were hawkish and way out of tune with the electorate.
Dick,
I agree with everything Hillary said about all of that, but it's not the way to win a Democratic primary these days. You just get it wrong.
Dick, what I think is that
like that anymore.
I think that Hillary probably gave the progressives enough. I don't discount your points when you talk about some of her more moderate or even beyond moderate points of view. I get it. But I think she gives the progressives enough, and I think that the Democrats, particularly after looking at who's leading the polls in the Republican Party and who might be their candidate, they are getting increasingly more concerned. I know this from my own discussions with having a candidate that can win. And I know we can all agree that nobody thinks Bernie Sanders can win a general election. I don't agree with you that he can win the primaries. I think he can win a couple primaries, but he can't win the primaries. So we're back to Biden. And understand, I'm a Biden fan. So when you say he might get in, this does not make me unhappy. But I kind of think Dershowitz had this right. I think Hillary did much better than you think tonight, and that it might do more to scare Biden out than to bring him in.
Yeah, I think that tomorrow the polls are going to show, within next week, Sanders moving up significantly, maybe some gain in some of the other candidates, and it coming right out of Hillary's vote. He entered this about 15 points behind Hillary in the national polls. I think he'll close a lot of that gap. And I think that when he does, that's going to set in motion a chain of events that will lead to the Biden candidacy. It also will set up a series of issues that will permanently divide the Democratic Party, separating the Sanders-Warren wing from the Obama-Hillary wing.
All right. Well, you're watching, folks, a special Newsmax television post-debate analysis.
Sorry, I just want to make one other point.
Yeah, we're not done. Go ahead, Dick. Sure.
In that dichotomy, it is a magnificent opportunity for the Republican Party.
Clearly, if you're right, it is.
And because as a Republican, you can be as tough as you want on Wall Street. You can be for Glass-Steagall. You can be against the Pacific Trade Agreement. You can do all of that. The Republican Party politicians are either heavily dependent on special interest money, in which case they can't do it, or heavily dependent upon a large conservative donor base, in which case they can. And if we nominate the right candidate, somebody who's prepared to charge into that Democratic division, the world is round. You have tremendous areas of consensus between the Tea Party and the Occupy Wall Street movement against the establishment of the Democratic Party.
I want to play cut number 12 for everybody. Hillary was asked how she would be different than Obama, how this would not be an Obama third term. And here's how she answered. Cut 12.
Secretary Clinton, how would you not be a third term of President Obama?
Well, I think that's pretty obvious. I think being the first woman president would be quite a change from the presidents we've had up until this point, including President Obama.
Is there a policy difference?
Well, there's a lot that I would like to do to build on the successes of President Obama, but also, as I'm laying out, to go beyond.
All right. I mean, the gender card you would expect. But I just find it interesting because I've been asking on my show here on Newsmax TV almost every night for months, how is she going to separate herself from President Obama? And Dick, not only Hillary, but all the others, they really, for the most part, except Webb, didn't separate themselves from President Obama. No. They praised President Obama as she did there.
Yeah, well, Sanders separated himself.
Yeah, on many issues, yes.
And over the banking issue and so on. But I think that it's not that that answer was bad, it was that it's pathetic. When all you can do is stand up there and say, I'm a woman, and that's essentially all she's doing.
Right.
It begs the question of what else is there. And while she's very good about putting forward a variety of affirmative programs, I thought Sanders did much better in that area. It's still, when you come down to it and you say, how would you be different from Obama, and you pin it on gender, it's like a souvenir stand. It's not a political campaign.
Right. And Rick, of course, you know, Dick is right. Bernie Sanders, as an admitted socialist, had a lot of policies that were different than Obama's, but nobody still came out and said, boy, that Obama's messed up. Guys, I would do this different than Obama. I would be this different than Obama.
There's a good reason for that. I'm not quite sure why you're missing it.
Because the satisfaction in this country, 35% think we're headed in the right direction.
Excuse me. This is a Democratic primary debate. Barack Obama in the Democratic Party, I'm not saying the nation, the Democratic Party has approval ratings in the 80s. Of course Hillary wasn't going to try and separate herself there, so she gave an answer that was a complete non-answer. Exactly, Dick, what you would advise a candidate to do.
No, I would have advised Sanders to come out in that answer and say, I disagree sharply with the specific trade agreement, and really gone crazy about currency manipulation, labor standards, genetically modified foods, tobacco, and all of those ancillary issues, and put Hillary on the defensive over that. That trade deal could never win in a Democratic primary, and Sanders' one defect was not to make it a huge issue.
Yeah, okay. The debate, guys, ran about 2 hours and 20 minutes. Between the five candidates. That's a lot of time. They got a lot covered, and we have a lot more to cover. Again, you're watching a very special edition here on Newsmax Television, the post-CNN Democratic primary debate, the first of, well, they're saying 6, but of course there's a lot of controversy, which we'll address with Dick Morris and Rick Unger when we come back. Will there be more debates? Should there be more debates? And what role does Debbie Wasserman Schultz play in all this? And is she taking orders from Hillary? But we're going to come back. We have more guests. We have pollster John Zogby, who will join us for one. He will give us his take on who won the debate. And, of course, we have a lot more to cover. So stay with us right here on Newsmax Television, our special post-debate coverage. Don't go away.